Hello friends, thanks for joining me today. Today we will discuss about a Spring Data JPA repository and entity handling. Also, we will see how to define a method for query handling. Friends, if you didn't watch my first video on a Spring Data JPA where I talked about Data JPA first, then I talked about who are the implementation today into the market for Data JPA, and then we talked about Spring Data JPA. There are so much of history that we discussed in our last video, like what is the picture behind a Spring Data JPA, like how it came into the existence, and what are the things that we are having in a Spring Data JPA that we discussed in our first video. So if you didn't watch that video, then I would recommend you to go to the channel and watch my first video on a Spring Data JPA. Also, I will put URL of my first video on a Spring Data JPA into the description. Friends, if you are not already subscribed to the channel, then please go ahead and subscribe to the channel so that you will get early notification. Like, comment and share on videos. Now let's start our discussion. So in our last video, we talked about different repository. Here you can see on the screen, like we have a repository from org.springframework.data.repository package. We have repository, which is the marker interface, and then it has been extended by CRUD repository and paging and sorting repository. All these are interface only. Query by example executor, JPA repository, all these are interface. So how to use these repository in your project, that's what we are going to discuss today. And particularly we will discuss on CRUD repository, which has by default there are method to handle CRUD operation. Like by using CRUD repository, you will be very conveniently able to handle all your CRUD operations. So we are going to discuss CRUD repository. Okay, now let's discuss about project setup. So the dependency which we will be using in our project setup is a Spring Web, Lombok, Spring Data JPA, Spring Boot DevTools, MySQL driver. So Lombok is, like, to make our life easier for getter and setter method. Like you will not have lot many code into your bin classes by using Lombok. So if you are not aware of Lombok, then please go to my channel and watch video about Lombok. I will put URL of my Lombok video into the description. Also, we are using Java 8 and Maven in this project with the latest Spring Boot release. If you don't want to use MySQL, use H2 database, and in that case you have to use H2 database dependency, which is very obvious. Now let's talk about application.properties, which I am using in my project. So basically a spring.datasource.username and a spring.datasource.password. So this username and the password will be used for authentication against my database. Now a spring.datasource.driver-class.name, that is mysql com.mysql.cj.jdbc.driver. This is the MySQL driver which we will be using because we are using MySQL database. Data source URL will be jdbc mysql localhost 3306, which is the default port, and the database instance which we will be using for our project is spring_db. JPA properties which we are going to use is a Spring JPA show SQL. So basically we want to show all the SQL query of JPA into the console. So we are going with show SQL is equal to true. Also spring.jpa.hibernate.ddl auto needs to be updated, so that basically we are not going to create a schema beforehand. So what we want is at the time of when we are starting our container, a schema has to be created, and also a schema needs to be created in a manner where whenever we restart our container, it doesn't mean that it has to drop our schema and then again create. So we are going with update, so that if any update is there, so it will just update it, it will not drop our schema. So that's why we are going with update. If you are using H2 database, then this your application dot properties would be very similar to the one which is given here. So what I'll do is I will put this PPT link into my description so that you can download this PPT as well. Now let's go one step deeper into the project. So I have defined my package structure in a way where there is a definite definition for each of the packages. The classes hold the classes these packages holds has a proper definition. So com.read.dar.entities, entities are classes for which corresponding table either created or exist into the database. So basically in under this entities package we are going to create all our entity bean. com.read.dow.repos repository. So under this package we will have all our repository are used to manage entities by using different set of CRUD methods. com.read.service will have all the service classes inside this package. Service layer which will make use of repo to persist entity data into the underlying database. So basically you will play around with your database using service layer where they will make use of repository. Now com.read.controller where we will have our REST controller which will act as a front layer to route the request to service and respond to the client. So this is how your project structure will look like. Now without further ado, let's go to the system and start our project. So to save the time, I already created a project which is a Spring Data JPA part 2 because this is the second video on a Spring Data JPA. Now into this entities we will have entities classes, so we'll get a student. So in this project we are managing a student, so we will define all the method, how to save a student object, how to find a student object, how to delete a student object, and how to update a student object. So all these things we are going to discuss in this particular video. Okay, so let me create a student entity over here. Okay, so this is my entity, student entity. What I have done is I have given it a data annotation of Lombok. So what does it mean is it will have all the getter, setter, to a string method and everything is already there. So we are good over here. Now this is entity which like if you want to define any class as entity, you need to annotate it with entity. And now the table name is a student. That what by default also it will be a student only, but I have given a dedicated name, something like a student. Okay, however you can comment it as well. Now this like long id, so each entity needs to have a primary key by that is mandatory. So id is a primary key. Why? Because I have annotated with id annotation from javax.persistence, and entity is also from javax.persistence. Table is also from javax persistence. And now this is generated value. Like I don't want to keep track of generation of this primary key. I want it to taken care by Hibernate, so they will take care of generation of primary key. Okay, these are the field which are the property or column of the table, which will be the column of the table, like a student name, city, a student age, and all. Now for this entity, let's create corresponding repository. So we'll go into the repo package and we'll create a repository. Okay, so this repository, as you see, this is an interface, a student repo, which extends CRUD repository. So whatever method is there in the CRUD repository, all will be there by default. You need not to provide implementation because it is an interface. So you need not to provide a definition for those method. At the runtime, Spring will provide the implementation. Here you have to give the entity class name, entity class type which your repository is supporting or dealing with. This is the primary key data type. So in this case we are using long id, so it is long data type. Okay, so now if you want to see like what are the methods by default available in CRUD repository, so what you can do is Alt Shift S, and here you can go with override or override implement methods. So you can see these are the methods that are available in CRUD repository, like count is there, delete is there, delete all is there, delete all, iterable, delete all, iterable, extends long. So by using id, by using iterable means a student type, it will accept your primary key type, delete by id, exist by id, and then find all by id, find by id, save all. So there are a whole lot of method for all your CRUD operation, like create, update, read and delete. So by using all this, you can do whole lot of CRUD operation. Okay, so we are good. Now we are done with repository, we are done with entity. Now what next? Next we will create a service class. So service class, what we will do is go to service package and then create a service class. So here we have a service class. So what we are doing is, it is annotated with service data JPA service, and here we have auto wide repository, a student repo. So Spring will set this student repo in this service class. Now by using a student repo, you can make different call, like you can make different call for handling your CRUD operation. So here we have a method called save students, and here we have a method find all students. So basically what I thought is, rather than saving a student, why not we'll go with a list of a student, where in the list sometime we will give one student, sometime we will give more than one student to save into the database. Okay, so here what it will accept is, it is accepting list of students, and then by using a student repo we are just sending those all students. Actually it accepts iterable type. Iterable is a list type, so that is okay, you will not get any issue. So student repo dot save all. There is another method in CRUD repository which is called save, and that is for saving a particular entity, that is one object. If you want to save a list of object, then you can go with save all, and that's what we are using here. Similarly for find all students, we just need to call student repo dot find all. It will just send us all list of students. So basically it will send iterable, so which is automatic, we can cast it to list. So that's what we are sending over here. Now we have to create endpoint for consuming client request for saving the student and find all students. Okay, now into the controller package we will create controller class. So here we just need to annotate it with REST controller, and now you can see we have to auto wire our service class. So here we have defined post mapping slash students. Now it will respond with response entity. If you are not aware of response entity, like how to handle response from REST, then there is a different video which is there on my channel for response entity. Please go and watch that video. I will put description of that video into the description. So now here what we are doing in save all student is, basically it in the request body we need list of a student, and that's what we are sending to the service class, and then service class will make use of a repository to save all list of students, and as a result it will respond as a saved student list. Actually it is iterable, which can be cast to list of a student. Now here in the response entity we are sending the status created and with all the saved student into the body. Now in the next API endpoint we have defined get mapping for slash students, and what it is doing is, basically it expects all the student whatever exists into the database, we need to send all those. So what we are doing is, by using service class we are making a call to find all students, which later will make a call to find all on repository. Okay, so we are done with all these endpoint. So now what we will do is, we already gone through the application dot properties. If you will see my application dot properties, then this is what the Spring dot properties. Now what we can do is, we will start our application. Okay, so our application is started. Now let's go to Postman, and let me go to database also. Okay, so this is the Postman. We have to go with post, and then we'll go for localhost 8080/students, and then we will go for body, then we will go for raw, and then we will select from here JSON. And here what we can do is we'll go with here what we will do is we will go with list of students. So list of students, so we have to go with a square bracket, then in the curly bracket we'll have the object, a student object. So what are the properties that we need? Just go here and see student name, city, and student age. So city and name string type, age is int. Okay, student name, city, student name, student age, and city. City is California. Okay, very simple. So this is what one object. Now let's create one more. So, comma, and student name is 2, age is 24, and this is also in California. So 2 students from California. They just send a request. Let's see what response we will get. Okay, we got 2, not 1 response, and here these are the objects got created. If you want, you can check the database. So I already opened my workbench for Spring DB. So what I'll do is I'll just go with select star from student semicolon, then select, run it. So here we have ID 1 and 2, city, student age 23, 20, student name Alusa 1 and Alusa 2. So these are the student object got created into the database. Okay, now what next? Next is we have to find these student object through REST API call. So what we will do is we will make a get call and slash students, and in this case we don't need any body, correct? So body none, and get simple, yeah, we'll just make a call. So we got the object. So if you will see here, then you can see this is the query to give a student object. We are done with create. Create has 2 options. One is save and another is save all. If you want to create a single resource, then obviously you will go with save. If you want to create a list of resources, then you will go with save all. And in this case, I have tried with save all. So for you, you have to try save. That will be a homework for you. Now next thing is find all. So which I already gone through. Find by ID is also there. So where you have to give the primary key and it will give you that primary key ID student object, which is good. Now what next? We'll go to the controller. Now we'll come to here in this repository, and what we will do is just go for Alt Shift S and then go for this guy. So we already gone with this find all, and we already gone with save all as well. Save all. Now what other thing we can try is, one is we can go with count, and then we'll go with count, and then we will go with exist by ID, and then we will go with delete by ID and delete. Okay, so let's go to our controller, So here we will go with slash student slash count. It will give us count, correct? And we will change it to find all students count. And it will simply has count and count. Simple. Now we need to create this in service class, which anyway we will create later. So this is about the count. Now students exists, and then we need to give ID. So find a student exist student by ID, and here at the rate path variable, because from path variable we will take this ID, path variable int ID. It should be long because primary key is long, correct? So exist by ID, and here we need to define that method, and here we have to go with boolean present. Simple, go with present. So we are good with count, we are good with exists. Now we'll go with delete by ID. Okay, delete, and here long ID, and here delete a student by ID, and in this case it will give us count, how many it deleted by the ID. Okay, I believe so. So let's check that what is the return type. Go here again, alt shift s, implement method count, and this guy, if I'll go with this guy, so long, it is giving long, correct? So we'll go here in our controller, we'll make it long, and then long. Sorry, that is for delete. Delete by ID it will be, let me check once again. Delete by ID. Okay, it is returning void. So we'll go with void. So come to here simply, and we'll go with OK, and here delete by a student ID, and we'll go with void. Sorry, null, and here we'll go with void. Okay, exist by ID, here also we need to change this to OK. Status student count, so you can change this status based upon the more meaningful result, but for now I just make it OK and create it for the post mapping where we are creating it. Okay, so now let's start find all students count. So F3, what we will do is we will go here and create a method. So student repo dot count, simple, and we will return that. that is long, I believe. Okay, student, and here we need to go over here, long. Okay, we are good. Now this is exist student by id. We'll go here. Now here we have to change this to okay. Now good. Now create this method into the service class. So return student repo dot exist by id. Okay, we are good. Now again here we'll go with okay, delete student by id, and what it will do is it will delete the student from the database. Okay, so the student repo dot delete by id. Okay, just save all, and then again we are going to start it. Very good, it got started now. So now what are the things that we are going to try? Right now we have two students into the database. If you will see here, then we have two. So now what are the things that we are going to try is we are going to call this URI get mapping. It doesn't need any parameter or body. So we'll make call. So get call, good. Sorry. And slash student slash count, and there is none. So 2. Right now we have 2 objects, which is good. Now what is next? Student exist by id. Okay, we need to send the id. We need to send primary key, that is id. Okay, and id, if you will go to the database, then id is 1 and 2. Okay, so let's go to 1, and so this id is exist. Let's go for 2. Good. Let's go for 3. So false, this id doesn't exist. Good. So we are able to find a student by id, whether it exists or not, boolean value. Good. Now what next? Delete by id. Okay, so what we will do is we'll go with delete. We'll delete this one. Okay, and here it is get mapping, but what I feel is let's make it delete mapping. Okay, delete mapping. Okay, and save it. Automatically it will restart because we are using dev tool. Okay, and then we are good. So we'll make it delete. Okay, and delete one. It doesn't require any body, it require id, primary key. So okay, it returns delete by id returns void. So we are getting only 200 response, nothing is in there in the body. So now what we will do is we'll go to database and fetch. So right now we have only 2, correct? Even if you will go for count, You will have one now. Oh, sorry. Get mapping, correct? So only one. So we are good with delete as well. So basically we are done with all sort of CRUD operation here, correct? So here in a student repo, if we will go with here, we are gone with count, we are done with delete by id, we are done with exist by id, find all we are done with, save all also, save is very similar, find by id, very uh, by using primary key you can find and all. So these are the things that are available and we tried most of it. But if let's say someone asks you to find by name, correct, you have to find the student by name, or you have like you want to write your own query in order to dealing with the database. So basically there are three ways where you have options to deal with database in your query by using your query. And one of the way and the most basic one is where you can define method which later changed by a Spring to the query. Meaning is, by using your method name, Spring is going to design a query for you. So that's what. So for learning more about those method, what you can do is you just go for Spring Data JPA. This is a Spring Data JPA. So simply you have to go for a Spring Data JPA. Okay, and this is the first link where you have to go for learn, and there you will have reference document, and go with working with a Spring Data Spring Data repository, and you can see here this method we discussed right now, correct? So if you will, I already provided all this information into my. So here you are seeing this CRUD repository. Most of the methods are here. However, there are other methods also like save all, delete. There are different versions of delete, like different ways of deleting. So most of them are here, but there are some more which you can obviously, when you will go with source, you can see multiple method here, correct? So you have whole lot of options, but sometimes what happens is like those methods are not enough to dealing with your job to be done, correct? Those methods are not enough to get you the job done. So in those cases or scenario, what you can do in those scenario, you can write your own query. Also, Spring has given you a way where you can define method in a some predefined way, so that corresponding query will be generated by Spring itself, correct? So if you will go to this, then you have query methods, and here you can read about what is query methods and all. And under 4.4, here you have defined query methods, like what are the ways to define query methods, which I have highlighted over here into my slides, like defining query methods. The repository proxy has two ways to derive and store a specific query from the method name. By deriving the query from the method name directly by using a manually defined query, available options depend on the actual store. However, there must be a strategy that decides what actual query is created. Okay, so meaning is, by using your method, you can define or instruct a Spring to give you a query based upon your method name. So this is a high level thing which is given here, like you can define method by using these keywords like find by, read by, get by. So these are finder method, exist by, count by, delete by. Here you can limit the response, like you want only 10 records or only 5 records. Those things you can define here. Distinct, you can make use of distinct. So these are the logical operator that you can make use into your query. Okay, these are the logical operator. So these are the other things, like predicate modifier, which you can make use of. So what I'll do is some of the well known query I'm going to define here. Okay, so these are the method which I have created, like read first 20 by a student name and city. Okay, so read first 20 by a student name and city, read by a student name and a student age, public boolean exist by student name, count by student name, delete by student name. So these are the different method which I have created based upon query method. So you can see corresponding query will be created by the Spring itself. Okay, so read find by student name, and so what I'll do is I'll go through all this one after another. Okay, so let me create first thing is, let's go with which we will go with first. Let's go with find by student name and student age. Okay, so let me create a method into service class. So this is our service class. Public list of a student we are going to send, and find by student name and age. So string name comma int age. Okay, and return a student repo dot find by a student name and age. Simple. Now we need to expose a endpoint for that. So what we will do is we'll go here and we'll come with @get mapping, and students. Okay, and then we will go with name students, and then we will go with let's go with, here we are just adding it method so that there will be difference between other endpoint and the one which we are handling through method query. Okay, a student method, and then we will go with a student name and age. Correct. So name, in the query we need that slash and age. Okay, and public response entity, and this will be object, and this will be method name, and we will go with @path variable, and string name comma @path variable, and int age. Good. So now what we need to do is we'll make a call to our service data JPA service dot correct and name and age, and it will give us list of student saved students, and we will return response entity dot status http status dot ok dot body, and in body we will have saved the students. Simple. Done. So this is done. Now why it is giving error? Let me see. Okay. Okay. No. Why? Should not give. Okay. We just need to save all, and it got restarted. So we are good. So now what we need to do is, basically if you will go to controller, we need to find by using name and age. Okay. So name and age. So we are using AND operator here. If you will see here, then we are using AND operator. A student by, a student name, and a student age. Another thing what you need to highlight here is find by, read by, search by. So all these are okay. Okay. So now you have to focus on these things. So find by a student name. So this is the field name. Field name where first letter got capitalized. That's the rule. First letter capitalize and rest will be as it is. So if you will see here, student name. So S got capital over here in your repository. And is a logical operator. And student age. If you will go here, student age. So S again will be capitalized over here. Student age. Okay, you got it. So this needs to be very restricted constraint. So the first letter needs to be capitalized of the field, and this is the logical operator and operator between. So basically what we expect from this method is, we expect all the student whose name is something and age is something. So whose name is Alosa, let's say, and whose age is 23. So if let's say only one Alosa is there with 23 age, then you will get that only. If you will have two Alosa with age 23, then you will get two. So like that. So let's create some of the resource now. So what we will do is we will create some. This is our, so Alosha 1, okay, and city is California, and age is 23, and this is Alosa 2. Again we'll go with California only, and student age is 25. Okay, like that. We'll just go for this. So it got created now. Similarly, let's make one more call. So it got created. Now let's go to the database and see. We have 123, 223, Alosa 1 and Alosa 1. So basically we have two row, this and this, with Alosa 1 and 23. So what we will do is we'll make a call now. We'll make a call using this. So good. Name is Alosa 1 and age is 23. We expect 2, and this will be a get mapping, and none. Body, we don't need to send anything. And we got the response. So this ID 3 and ID 5, we got the response. If you will go to the database, ID 3 and ID 5. So we are good here. Okay, so I have explained you how to go with query method, correct? So if you will see here, then this is the corresponding query built by Spring based upon method. So select all the field column where a student name is equal to and a student age is equal to whatever input you have given. Based upon that, it is building. So like based upon method name, Spring is going to create query for you. Similarly, if you will see here, read first. So basically find by first 20, find, here we have to read. You can go with read or find, search, anything will work. So here I am using read. So read first 20, or you can use stop as well here, by student name and city. So let's say if you have more than 20 records, then it is going to give you only 20 records. That's what. So you have to try this. So this will be a homework for you. You can try. Now, exist by a student name. That's what we want to check. So what we will do is exist by a student name, and then we will go with count by a student name, and then delete by a student name. So here we are using transactional. So you must be aware of transaction. Transaction is something where, let's say you have a group of a statement. So you want to execute all of those statement or none of those statements. So this is called transaction. Basically transaction is something which is associated with group of thing, where you want those execution in a way where you want all to execute or none of them to execute. Correct? So transactional we are not going to cover in this particular video, but like whenever you are going to modify, update anything into the database, try always to go with transactional thing. Correct? Because in this particular case, if you are not going with transactional annotation, so basically this transactional you can use at the code level itself, where from where you will call this delete by a student. So you have a set of a statement, so you just define transactional to that set of a statement. So that way also it is okay. So what I have done here is I just defined this transactional on this method itself. Okay, otherwise it will give me a error at the time of execution of this query against the database. So make sure to use transactional for modification or updation when you are doing any modification or updation. So what now we will do is we will go with exist by a student, count by a student, and delete by a student name. So all these are a student by name. So there are 3 endpoint that we need to create. Correct? So let's create that. So what I'll do is I'll go to controller, and what I'll do is let me create 1, 2, 3. So I have created 3. Now what I'll do is I'll go to the repository, and this is exist by name. So come here. So this is exist by name. Okay, one more thing, at the time of creation of all those endpoint, make sure your endpoint, that is URL, that is not creating any ambiguity. That needs to be unique. That you have to make sure 100%. Okay, so here we'll have exist by student name. So only name is required over here, which is good. And we don't need this guy also. And here we'll change this with exist by student name, and we don't need this. And exist by a student name. So what is the return type? Let's see here. So exist by student name, boolean. So boolean will go with boolean present. Okay, and add this to here, present. Okay, good. Exist by student name is good. Now what next? Next is count by student name. Count by student name. So we'll go here. We'll go with count by student name. So okay, and now these two URI same, so we need to make it differ. So we'll go with count. Okay, and we need only this. We don't need this. And this will be long or int. Let me see here. What is this? Int. So we'll go with int. Int count, and we'll send count. Okay, so good. Now what is third? Third, here we will see in our repository, delete by a student name. Now come to controller, delete by a student name, and here let's add delete by name, and here remove this parameter, delete by name. We are good. What it is sending us? Delete by int. How many deleted? So we'll go with that. Int deleted count. Deleted. Okay, deleted count. Okay, deleted count. Everything is done. Now what we will do is we will just go here and we will go with student repo dot exist by a student name, and simply it will return. Okay, similarly we will go with this guy. We'll go with create method and we'll go with return student repo dot count by a student name. Good. Similarly we'll go with, where is our controller, delete by, and here again a student repo dot delete by a student name. Okay, let's save all, and it is giving us issue. Why? Okay, return statement is not there. Return. Okay, very good. Return is there now. Good. So we are done with all this. Correct? So yeah, we have defined all the endpoint for exist by a student, count by a student name, and delete by a student name. So we have defined all this. So what we will do now? So we have to test all these scenarios. So first thing is exist by a student name. Okay. So what is the exist by a student name? This. Okay. And this is the URL. So let's see. This is our, and we will go with Alosha1, and this will be a get car. Alosa1 is there, Alosa2, Alosa3, false. So Alosa3 is not there. Okay, good. So we validated this exist by a student name. Now we'll go with count. Okay, so count, and then we have to go with, let's say, Alosa1. So let's get the count 2. Go with Alosa2 3. Let's go with 3, and let's see, because Alosa3 is not there, let's see what it is giving us. 0. Alosa3 is not there, so meaning is exception is handled properly here. by default by the Spring people itself. So that's great. So now what next? We'll go with delete. Delete by student name. So let's see. We have 2 Alosa and 3 Alosa 2. 2 Alosa 1 and 3 Alosa 2. So let's go for delete. And we'll go with Alosa 1. 2. It got deleted. 2 got deleted. So let's see. Okay. Earlier it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 was there, correct? From 2 to 6. Now let's run it. We have only 3. All the Alosa 2. All the Alosa 2 is present. Now let's delete Alosa 2 as well. Great. So now we will have nothing into the database. Oh, everything is gone. So we have seen right now, so all this query, how this query generated. This query is generated based upon your method naming. So here you can see count by. So basically this is very important. This is extremely important. Keyword count by. You can use count by, you can use delete by, you can use exist by, and after that you have to use your field name. Field name first character will be capital, and then you can use different logical operator also. Okay, so basically you need to practice a lot in this. So you have to practice a lot. So it is very easy to implement. Like you need not to write even a single query when you are defining a method into your repository. You need not to write a query. Okay, so it is great. By using your method name itself, Spring is generating a query for you, correct? However, there are constraints, like there are predefined rule to define this method name, and that's what is there in this PPTs, which I am going to attach in the description. I will give a link from where you can download this PPT. Okay, and so I would say please try all these options how to build query using method. I have shown you how to go to query lookup strategy, how to define query method, all these things, how to go for the documentation of a Spring, that also I shown you. However, I'll also attach this PPT into the description. I'll give a link from where you can download this PPT and practice, because practice is very much needed. So today what we discussed is we gone through CRUD repository, how to handle your CRUD operation using CRUD repository. Also we gone through some of the query method. In our next video we will talk about paging and sorting. So basically if you will see, then we already discussed about CRUD repository, we discussed about query methods. Now in our next video we will talk about paging and sorting. Also we will talk about different query method. Like if let's say even by using your method also you are not very satisfied, and you actually want to write your query, your own query, so that also we are going to discuss in our next video. Into next video we'll talk about mapping thing, like how different mapping, one-to-one mapping, one-to-many mapping can be done in a Spring Data JPA, and whole lot of stuff we are going to talk in a Spring Data JPA. Okay, so stay tuned guys. I'll see you in my next video. Take care. Thank you.